Welcome to Library Out Loud, a conversation about any and all things related to the Spokane County Library District. Library Out Loud is brought to you by the Spokane County Library District and our friends at STCU. Now, here's your host, Jane Baker.
Hello and welcome to Library Out Loud. I'm Jane Baker, the Communication Director for the Spokane County Library District. My guest today is Doug Stumbo, who is the Operations Director at the County Library District. Hi, Doug.
Hi, Jane. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in today. We're going to talk about quite a few things.
Okay.
We're going to talk about libraries in general, and of course we're going to talk about the Spokane County Library District and why we wanted to do this program today is there's sometimes confusion.
Mm-hmm.
People, they'll say, where do you work? And I say, I work for the Spokane County Library District. And they'll say, I love that downtown branch. And, we know because it's our jobs that, okay, the downtown library is a different system, but people don't know that.
Right.
So it's an interesting situation sometimes. I want to start out by saying what's interesting, and working at the library is the first time this has ever happened in my life. There's our library system.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Spokane Public Library System.
Yep.
There's the Liberty Lake Library.
Mm-hmm.
There's Sparks Central. There's libraries in the area, and we're not in competition.
Correct.
We all work
Absolutely
together.
not.
In
Right.
fact, we work together to strengthen each other's programs and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny to not be in competition with the other guys
Right.
and to work together with them. But still, there's some differences that we have to often point out. Not that we want to get into a political discussion, but there are the levies and bonds.
Sure.
And that's where it gets very confusing for a
Yeah.
lot of people. So let's talk about libraries in general. And I had
Okay.
mentioned just a moment ago, we have 19 libraries
Yeah.
in the Spokane area.
Yep.
Spokane is really a literary town.
It is.
Uh-huh.
It is. For the population size that it is, it's really fortunate to have so many libraries in the area, public as well as academic. We have strong academics in the region as well.
Oh,
and
I don't think I even counted them in my number.
That's a whole nother kettle of fish. But with the library's placement, both Spokane County Library District, Spokane Public Library, which serves the city of Spokane proper, the Liberty Lake Municipal Library, and then Sparks Central. Good coverage across the county.
Yeah. And every once in a while, I'll run into somebody who goes to the library anymore?
Right.
And obviously you haven't been there lately, because last year alone, I brought some numbers with
Okay.
me. We had over 1,300,000 visits to our libraries. So there's people going to the libraries, and 117,000 card holders.
Yes.
And that's just the county.
That is right.
Just the
That's
county.
Correct, yeah.
So within the city of Spokane, there's 6 libraries. And then outside of the city of Spokane, but within Spokane County, there's our libraries, in which we have 11.
Right.
And then, as you mentioned, Liberty Lake, Sparks Central is in downtown. That's kind of a co-op type of library.
Yeah.
Little different model, but still it's awesome. And then all the academic libraries, which are, I'm assuming, one at each college?
At least.
At least.
Yeah, depending on the university, some of them have specialty libraries as well as their main academic library.
Okay.
But yeah, quite a few.
Yeah.
And the great thing about it, particularly with respect to the public libraries, is that we have reciprocal use agreements amongst all of us.
Explain that.
So what that means is that if you, for example, Spokane County Library, as you said, we serve the part of the county outside of the city limits of Spokane, and of course Liberty Lake directly. So our funding comes from there. We're property tax funded.
Yes.
And that's where that's how we get our funding to operate our libraries. And they're funded through different sources. In both cases, they're funded by their city governments. However, the residents of all of those locations can actually get a card at any of the libraries that I just mentioned through reciprocal use agreements. And that just means it's an agreement between our library system and, in one case, the City of Spokane and the Spokane Public Library, and in the other, Liberty Lake and the Liberty Lake Municipal Library, for people to come and get a library card at those locations and vice versa, so that you can take advantage of using any of those libraries in our county.
That's such a great service to the community, because you can say, I'm going to the library, and you can go to any library in the area that way. That's how we work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so important that we do work together to make libraries a great asset in this community and be as convenient as possible.
Right.
The tricky part is when you get to the funding. As you'd mentioned, City of Spokane libraries are funded by the City of Spokane.
It's part of their annual budget. Yep.
Yeah, and our libraries are funded through a property tax, and the property tax is probably 98% of our funding.
Yeah,
something like that.
Somewhere in there, about
Yeah,
93, 95, somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's pretty high as far as how much we depend on that, but that's what makes us happen.
Right.
And then if you look at the overall budget, libraries are like 1% of the county budget. So we're a very low amount of that. But because county's in our name, we're not necessarily well, we kind of are a branch of the county government. Do you have a better way of explaining how that is? Because that's a tough one.
Yeah, it's always fun to try and sort of navigate that particular map.
Sure.
The Spokane County Library District is what's considered a junior or an independent taxing district. So on your property tax statement for those property owners in our service area, there's a line that says library, and that portion of their property tax, that's how much they pay through their property taxes that then funds the libraries that in their area. We actually have our board of trustees, which is an independent board, but the county commissioners approve and the board members that are appointed to the board. So there is that relationship there. And of course, as people pay their property taxes, they get that assessment through the auditor. Their money goes into the treasurer. So we have that relationship with the county as well. So yeah, there is that relationship there. But you're exactly right. Because we're governed by our board of trustees, they're the ones that represent the public directly to the library and actually oversee everything that we do.
So yeah, it's a difficult thing. So we're not a county department.
Correct.
But we're kind of related in a way, like a distant cousin.
Yeah. And it's one of those, getting back to the cooperation conversation that we were talking about. That's one of those examples of that cooperation. Of course, we are tied through state and local laws to the Spokane County proper. But also we do have that cooperation, which helps assist us and actually, quite frankly, make better use of the taxpayer dollars.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a great investment for the taxpayers, how this all works and how we work together for everybody. So we talked about reciprocal agreements, and we've talked a little bit of our background now. When we mention levies and bonds, that's when we really want to separate, though, to make it clear, and that's where people get confused.
Right.
Levies and bonds, those words alone confuse people.
Yeah.
Levy is operating when we go before the voters for operating funds, and a bond is when we go before voters for new facilities, buildings, and things like
for
that.
A very specific project or set of projects.
Generally, that's how it goes. So when you hear the different libraries or levies and bonds are always going up in front of us for some reason, that's because we work for you.
Sure.
Right? We work for you, and you get to make these decisions. So, but I mean, even one time recently, in the last couple of years, there had been an article about Spokane Public Library having a levy.
Right.
Yet the newspaper had the headline saying it was the county library. So everyone gets confused. It is a confusing thing. So it's all good. The trick is just to look at your ballot when it arrives in the mail,
right,
and you know which library. If your library is in there, then depending on where you live, That's the one up for election.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have 11 libraries
Yes,
now.
we do.
Yeah, and we are all over the place. I think what we're going to do is we're going to come back after a break here in a moment, and we're going to talk about some of the different libraries, because we're everywhere from Cheney to Otis Orchards.
Cheney to Otis Orchards, Fairfield to Deer Park, and lots of places in between.
That's right. All right. So we're going to come back and talk more about that and talk about the library in your neighborhood on Library Out Loud.
Hi everyone, I'm weather forecaster and assignment anchor at Spokane Talks Online, Colin Pittman, and I am honored to be the host of the new program, Spokane's Youth Spotlight, brought to you by Spokane Talks Online and the Spokesman Review, where we are interviewing and getting to know outstanding youth in our community each month. If you'd like to nominate someone in our community that you think should be recognized, that is doing something great here in the region or has an amazing story, visit SpokaneTalksOnline.com or Spokesman.com and look under Youth Spotlight to nominate. And be sure to tune in each month as we find the best in the Inland Northwest.
Hi, I'm Larry Myers, owner of River Ridge Hardware. Welcome to our garden center here on the corner of Garland and Driscoll. We have fresh plants that come in weekly from all of our local growers. We can make your garden look like our garden. Here at River Ridge, we've been here 30 years. We're your full-service neighborhood hardware store. This is our sprinkler aisle where my knowledgeable staff will help you put together your sprinkler system so it will make your yard lush green for the spring and summer. This is River Ridge Hardware's rental center, where we provide a multitude of equipment for rent for the do-it-yourselfer. Next time you're working on your home or yard this spring and summer, stop by, say hi, and we'll help you get the project done.
See you tomorrow night, and thanks again for taking care of the painting.
I got this.
Bye.
Weekends are made for painting. Let the experts at Rada Paint take care of you.
Hi. This looks amazing.
Rada Paint, over 80 years of quality, tradition, and trust. Find it in every can.
Hi, and welcome back to Library Out Loud. I'm Jane Baker, and joining me today is Doug Stumbo from the Spokane County Library District. Doug's the operations director, and you've been with the district quite a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of decades.
A couple of decades.
Yeah, I'm into my third decade with the district.
Wow. That's amazing. So you have a lot of history.
That comes with age,
It
yes.
does come with age, doesn't it? And I'm not going to pick on your age too much because I know I'm older than you, so I'll be careful where I tread. But we just celebrated our 75th
We did.
anniversary.
Yes, we did.
As a library district just last year.
Yeah.
That's a long time to
It
be
is.
around. And we had some humble beginnings.
We did.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, it's always... So Spokane County Library District, which originally was formed as Spokane County Rural Library District, it actually was one of the first two library districts in the state initially. And I say initially because in 1938, there was a vote in Spokane County to create a library district, and there was one in Pierce County as well. So those were the first two in the state. And it passed, so a library district was formed, but unfortunately, shortly after that, someone with a fine-tooth comb went over the legislation that sort of set forth the guidelines for library districts and said, wait a minute, this legislation isn't good, and had to go back to the voters in 1942. And it passed there as well. So that was effectively our actual date of formation was 1942.
1942.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we tried once, we're passed.
Tried once, passed, but then it turns out not all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed. So.
That's right. Yeah, somebody caught it, but it was great that the voters brought it back and
Yeah.
said again, yes.
And I think it was interesting at that particular time because you think about that 3-year period between 1938 and 1942. There was a big event getting the United States into World War II at the end of 1941. So for the voters at that point to come back in 42 and say, you know what, we are in a different time, but we still want to do this.
We still do
We
it.
thought it was fantastic.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
think
that's
it would be,
great.
yeah.
And then I'm looking at some brief timeline documents here, but town of Fairfield and the city of Medical Lake, a couple of the first ones to contract with the district, and they had deposit stations.
Yeah.
So we had our first building was actually in downtown in Brown's Addition.
Yeah.
And that was our offices, and then we had services provided through deposit stations and bookmobiles.
Yeah. So
I mean, how modern is that?
it's one of those things that everybody says everything old is new again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It tends to come around, and that was a great example of getting those services out into the community. Just as the library district was forming. And the best way to do that at that time was, hey, let's go out there and we will find places that we can leave materials and people can come and get them. We can visit them in a bookmobile. It was, it works.
Sure.
It's a great service model.
Yeah, it is a great service, and like you said, what's old is new again.
Right.
It's kind of a mobile society we have now, so it may come back.
Yeah.
Those bookmobiles, and I don't know about you, but I have wonderful memories of bookmobiles. I remember them coming around, and I'm old enough to remember, not quite 1938. Old, but anyway, the Valley Library was the first one we actually built.
Our first open library was the Valley Library, and it opened in 1955 on the same site that the current Spokane Valley Library is on, out there on Main, just off of Sprague and Pines in the Valley. And that was a building where the land was actually donated.
I didn't know that.
From a private citizen.
Oh, that's cool.
And the board accepted it, and they built a library there and opened up the doors in 1955, which was great. It's kind of fun to think about, but also a little bit scary at times to figure that building is actually as old as it is.
Yes.
Having worked there for several years, you get to see little bits and pieces of the building, and you sort of been able to tell. It's like, oh, I'm in the 1955 section, or there was an expansion in '68. It's like, oh, this is that new part, and then there was a larger expansion in '86.
86, yeah.
That added the second floor, expanded the children's area, and really modernized it, at least for 1986, which I then go and figure out that was actually 32 years ago.
32 years ago, yeah.
Was that major renovation.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting.
But when it was built in 1955, it was like an architectural design that was very popular, and
then when it was renovated in '68, it actually got some accolades for architecture.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
There's some great pictures, but it was a great example of I'm going to get dinged on this because I didn't remember exactly what it was. Our executive director will let me know, but an example of modern architecture, and it got some accolades for it, which was great.
Yeah, and then '86 was the last time it was updated, and looked very modern.
Yes,
it's kind of dated now, but then you said 30 some years ago.
32 years or so, yeah.
Yeah, but it was our first.
It was our first. It was our first library location where people could come in and check out materials.
But also that same year, 1955, we contracted for service in Deer Park. So immediately, at a very young age, the library district was all over the place. With Cheney, Medical Lake, Deer Park, the Valley.
Yep.
So
Spangle, Waverly. Yeah.
And it was in 1968 we dropped the word rural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure the decision was made that it removing that word probably helped freshen up or modernize.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of cities and towns in our area, in our service area, that is. We often think city of Spokane, and any of us who live in the area, whether we're in the city or not, somebody asks you, where are you from? You say Spokane.
Right.
Whether you live in Liberty Lake or Cheney or whatever, you say Spokane. So that was... kind of forgot where I was going with that, but we say we're from Spokane, but there's all these other little towns and cities around, like this city of Cheney.
Right.
They're incorporated as a city. Millwood, Deer Park. So the word rural may have been like, wait a minute, we're a city. We're not exactly as rural as you think.
Yeah, and I think part of the underlying state legislation defined it as a rural library.
Gotcha.
You had to have it there in your name, and or it helped define it in terms of that. But you're right. There are lots of not only small incorporated towns and cities, but also areas that people are very familiar with that maybe didn't incorporate until later. I mean, Spokane Valley, the city of Spokane Valley didn't incorporate until 2004, but people identified with Dishman and Opportunity and Vierdale and Green Acres and all of that. So yeah, there is certainly that sense of not only being part of Spokane when you're speaking in very general terms, but your very own community and neighborhood.
And we were everywhere there.
We were everywhere.
And so we had, in 1965, a woman named Susan Barclay became our director. And last year when we were getting ready to put our 75th stuff together, I read a lot about her. What an amazing woman.
Right.
She did some great things for the district. And one of them was to build the North Spokane Library. And it's now at 44 East Hawthorne.
Right.
But I remember from some older pictures, it was in a little building off of Division.
Yeah, just off of Division now, for those familiar with that area, 395, just past Hawthorne, there is the North Spokane Bicycle Shop, I believe is what it's called. It was in that building. It's not too far from where the current location is, but a much smaller location. And yeah, they opened that up in 68 or so.
68.
And that served that area for a while.
Out of what's now
Out of what
the bike
now is
shop.
a bike shop.
Wow. So the North Spokane Library opened in 72 at 44 East Hawthorne, and it is still there now. Recently remodeled kind of inside. Very nice, very modern looking. So that's come along. Another library that's moved around a little bit, kind of morphed in a way, is the Argonne Library.
Yeah.
The
Argonne Library, one of our earlier libraries, we had a location off of Orchard Avenue out in the Millwood area, and a little bit after that we had a presence in the Millwood Town Hall. And then those combined, and for a while we had a location on Argonne and Grace, which is now it's a strip mall kind of place.
Yeah.
One of the tenants is a Domino's.
Domino's Pizza. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some other tenants in there, but yeah, that building itself originally was built as the North Argonne Library, and the other half of it was our administration offices at the time, and we were there for 10 to 15 years, I believe. And then moved, and then that was replaced with the current Argonne Library and Administration offices on Argonne and Upriver Drive. And so yeah, that one's moved around a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how these things morph. And the other one I wanted to mention quickly was Moran Prairie. Started as just kind of a book drop.
So yeah, Deposit Station. It was my most vivid memory of it is that it was a book. The presence was a book drop in a parking lot where you would drive up and you could drop your materials off there that you checked out in other locations, and then we actually had a storefront in the mall that is currently occupied by the Albertsons is in that mall, and I think there's a ear and eye clinic.
57th and Regal.
57th and Regal, and we were there for a couple of years, about 6 years, I believe, and then moved to its current location, just a bit further up on Regal, just about 62nd and Regal or so.
Yeah, the Moran Prairie Library, and that's great because it shows how that community came together, said, this is a great service. Let's make this happen. Let's make our own library. And they voted that bond in, and we built that library. Beautiful library up there.
Fantastic library.
And very well used. So Spokane's just such a great library town.
It is.
Great stories. So we're running short of time. Do you have anything quick that you want to add to this conversation?
You know, I just I think just a real quick plug for our newest location, the Bookend,
yes.
in the Spokane Valley Mall. It's a fantastic, and if I'm going to give any sort of insider secrets on anything, I would say visit that location if you're looking for something to pick up and go with on your car trip, or for your vacation read, or just to take home and enjoy right away. There's lots of good material there, and a lot of people don't know about it yet.
Yeah.
And so I would certainly encourage people to try that out and really take advantage of it.
I agree. That's great advice. There's some hidden gems there at the Bookend, the Spokane Valley.
Spokane Valley Mall.
So this is great. This was a great conversation. You know, when I came into it, I thought, oh, let's talk about these things. But you know, as we're doing this program here, I'm thinking about how great Spokane has been to really be supportive of its libraries and appreciative of the value, and we appreciate them because we love the services we provide for them. So
yeah, absolutely
what
agree
a
with
great,
that.
Well, this just turned out
Absolutely
great.
great.
Doug, you'll have to come back again someday.
Thanks, Jane.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun having you here, and we'll be back, and we'll talk more about these kind of things on another time. But for now, that's it for today on Library Out Loud. See you next time.
Library Out Loud is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Library Out Loud is brought to you by the Spokane County Library District and STCU. Go visit and explore your local library today.